So, welcome, Andy Hallett. Nice to see you again. For our viewers, Andy has got a long background within recruitment, which I'm sure I'll ask you to explain now. But most recently, it's Recspand, isn't it? Is the sort of the holding business for the various interests.
That's right.
So start, Andy, by telling us a little bit about yourself, your background, and what you're up to at the moment, if you would.
Yeah, like many people, I fell into recruitment. I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but a friend of mine was working for Computer Futures, another friend for Progressive. Clearly, neither of them wanted to work with me, so they recommended me to Huxley Associates. I joined Huxley in 1999, just before the dot-com crash and the Y2K fixes and all of that.
Yeah.
Became a contract recruiter, did that recruiter through to manager for a number of years. Then became commercial manager at Huxley, latterly commercial director of S3 Group, where I was lucky enough to be part of a very small part of a very big company and a very big growth of an international STEM business. In 2017, I moved into innovations and investments, which was an amazing look outside in at the recruitment world and working with startups, looking at all the cool new tech out there, looking at really the sort of challenges that recruitment agencies and firms will face going forward. Left S3 last year and set up my own business in March at the start of the global pandemic.
I know we have to deal with what's in front of us, don't we, sometimes? But I think, and I'm sure you'd agree, it represents, yes, some challenges, but there's always opportunity within those challenges. I'm absolutely certain of that. So with what you're doing now, then, is that consultancy with businesses of all different sizes? Have you got quite a diverse range of clients in there at the moment?
Yeah, there's a fairly diverse range in there. So typically, my niche, if you like, was international contract operations, compliance, supply chains, working on the infrastructure. I was effectively a lot of the times a link between the front and the back office, and just sort of was the glue that made things go together. So typically in larger firms, that's where our niche. Within smaller firms, typically I will help them with some of the more general business pieces like team building, financing, policies, procedures, some of the sales tactics, marketing, and just support them as a strategic advisor. If you like, the third sort of string to my bow is working with vendors on the technology or the services that the recruitment industry and indeed recruitment agencies would need. So working with them on productizing their offerings and building the product, solving the problems that the industry needs solved.
Yes, yeah, perfect. And I think you're, quite uniquely placed in that regard then, with all the experience that you've had, definitely. I'm sure you can look at it from all different perspectives, whether it's a smaller business starting out on their own or maybe they're at that first hurdle where they're looking to scale, or a larger business that maybe is preparing for exit or further expansion, maybe globally. So lots of experience. What would you say, Andy, you love most about the recruitment industry, having had 20 years plus in and around it?
I think the fact for me that just every day is different. Literally, no one day is ever the same. The product isn't fixed. It moves, it talks, it walks, it makes up its mind. The customers do the same. So it's very, very challenging and varied. And just going back to your point around I think the challenges for a firm looking to scale from 10 to 20 people are exactly the same as a firm looking to scale from 100 to 1,000 people. You've just got to have a strategy in place and a clear plan on how to do it. But effectively, the mechanism is exactly the same. Understand where it is you're going, understand how you're going to get there, and be very clear around what you're going to be famous for.
Yes, yeah, and a nice turn of phrase. That's exactly right, isn't it? Get clear on what you're going to be famous for, because we all need to be known in this day and age, and arguably it's easier to get known than ever before because you can control your own media more so now than ever before. I mean, the recruitment industry, I love it. I love dealing with people. I love the challenges it represents, and you've got to overcome all of those. But it does have some frustrations within it. I mean, What would you say has been the most frustrating thing over the years? And just to tag on to that, where do you see the recruitment industry going next?
I think if I look at the recruitment industry, I generally will look at it in UK versus international. I think it's very, very different in the UK for the international, and people viewing this outside of the UK, how relevant my sort of comments and notes will be. But in terms of recruitment, there's been a massive commoditization. I think the given number of recruitment firms in the UK, 35,000, 40,000, has made it very, very difficult. I mean, typically it wasn't as crowded when I started in 1999. So it was very, people were able to grow, I guess, bigger businesses. The margins seem to be stronger. If you look at the placement fees probably haven't moved with wage inflation. So I think the recruitment job is very different. I would say as well, it's a lot more complicated. When you're a 360 recruiter in 1999, it was, you write your advert for the paper, you got your 10 CVs in, and you placed the best one of those. So it was very, very different. Now, with all the sources of data, with all the things you have to do to keep up with, all the channels, all the content you have to put out, I mean, a 360 recruiter is pretty much running their own business on a daily basis now, and it looks really, really complex.
Yeah, it can do. Do you think it's, I mean, obviously the recruitment industry has almost mushroomed, hasn't it, in terms of the number of firms? Do you think any of that is down to sort of the fragmentation in terms of it's a lot easier these days to just set up on your own because all you really need is a computer and a phone, isn't it? Or is it due to growth? What do you put it down to, the number of new people in the industry or number of firms?
Yeah, I think you're right. There's probably a lower barrier to entry. I mean, when I joined in '99, the barrier was the candidates. So, and the method of getting candidates was print media. So if you didn't have access to the print media, then it's very difficult for you to build or scale a database. For the price of a LinkedIn recruiter, you've probably got the same access as some of the biggest firms in the world. What I would say is, still the best firms that I work with are the ones that build their business. They'll build their customer relationships. They will build their databases. They will build their communities of contractors. They will invest, as opposed to the very transactional ones that just dart around and just filling jobs and order taking. Again, the firms that did the former probably rode out the pandemic a lot better than the firms who did the latter.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I think that customer experience and relationships are such an important thing, aren't they? I know it must seem like the most obvious thing in the world, but what are we without those relationships? And I think even more so now. I don't know if you agree, actually, but more so they need to be quite deep personal relationships with people so that you actually know what's driving them on and what's in their head, rather than just transactional. Is that right, do you think? Or
that's fair, and I see a big difference. I mean, probably I see it more on the vendor side of things. We've got a vendor community where we discuss a lot of issues, and there's a big difference between the founders and the salespeople. So the founders are interested in sort of the long term of the business. They're interested in the next few years. They'll talk very strategically. They'll go to events and they won't pitch. They just want to be part of the conversation in the room. The sales guys are on a quarterly burn. It's all about what can you do for us? What can you do for us? And it's just a very different alignment. So what I would say is that I think the big change the industry needs to make is people coming into recruitment need to see it as a career, not as a job.
Yeah.
And I think firms need to treat their people as, they're going to be here for 5-10 years. We expect them to be here for 5-10 years. Yeah. Let's not burn them out in 3 months. This decision we take now, how will that look in 5 years? Hire the right people. And I think firms probably need to be more careful about who they hire. I think there's that sort of churn and burn mentality, but also as well realize that you get what you need to work people as careers as opposed to just jobs.
Yeah, no, I agree. And we talk, don't we? I say we talk, but the word culture and the words culture and values, I mean, that they've exploded for me in the last 5, 6, 7 years, you see it everywhere. How many people actually have that as part of their forward strategy? I'm not convinced it's a big enough percentage. You can talk about it, but delivering it on a day-to-day basis is a very different thing. Do you see that? Is that something you weave into the strategy that you talk about with your clients, building a sustainable, authentic culture in their business? Is that something people are taking seriously now?
Yeah, and if they're not, they should be. I mean, you can put your values up on the wall, or you can put them into your business, and that's your choice to do it. What I've seen with most companies, that it's living those values that's really important. For example, it comes down to people want, if the leadership want you to use the database, then you use the database, and you measure people by the database, as opposed to just telling them off once a month when they haven't done anything on the database. So I think very much the culture and the values start from the top, and very much so. But I think there's some amazing businesses out there, and there's a lot of good intention around growing people's businesses. Typically, owner, manager, founders, they've been great billers, or they've run a very small team. They typically haven't had to build businesses. Yeah. So what I see often their challenges is just those things around building a business. Now, when I was at S3, I never had the challenge, or at least in the last sort of 15 years, of having to deliver the sales numbers, because I was responsible for the infrastructure. So having that outside in look, both at S3, but also as well now in other businesses, and that enables you to see things, because you're not in that sort of head down monthly sprint.
Yes. Yeah. So you can get that helicopter view, can't you then? And rather than just being on the ground constantly. I think that is valuable, definitely. Well, hugely valuable, critical, in fact. What sort of advice would you be offering someone if I had to get you to pin yourself down to like the number one or the top two pieces of advice for someone thinking about starting up on their own, or maybe recently started? What would be the things you'd point them towards, Andy?
The first thing I'd say is that you've got to work out why you're doing it. You've got to work out where you're going to. So what's your end point? And in 5-10 years, what does the business look like? And have a plan, and then work towards it. Yeah. That's absolutely number one. Number two is, what are you going to be famous for? We talked about it earlier. Have a niche. If you're a small business, you need to be famous for something. You can't take on Hays and Echoes, in generalist staffing. So get really good at something really niche, would be my advice. The third thing is what I call the courage of conviction, and the courage of execution. You need to make sure that you're doing the things that don't come naturally. Mm-hmm. And if you're not, pay someone else to do it. If you know you need to do marketing, you either do it yourself or you pay someone to do it. If you're not good at operations, then get a virtual assistant to come in and do that and write the check. So for me, it's about holding yourself to account as well, and doing all the things you need to do, even if they're not comfortable. But making sure that, because you'll just end up doing the things you do like doing, and you won't be able to scale and build a business if you just do the things you like doing. Yeah,
fantastic. James and I at Born talk a lot about, collaboration, because it's really the key piece for us, and bringing together a network, and not just encouraging people that are working within Born, or ultimately working within Born, but bringing that collaboration so that they're not always on their own. That's one of the things I felt in the very early days, that I was out there on my own. And I very quickly learned that surrounding yourself with the right people and having people that would hold you accountable. It's great being the boss and going, I can take the day off. In fact, actually, I got less freedom when I became my own boss, because the only person holding me accountable was me, and sometimes Mrs. Butler, of course, very good at that. But surrounding myself with the right people and recognizing that I'd have hired a lot earlier, actually, in truth. I always regret doing that first VAT return myself. It was like, this is the worst use of my time. Great that I know how to do it, but I'd been better off just giving it to the accountant or bookkeeper and spending those 2 days business developing, because that's what I'm good at and that's what I enjoy. So fantastic advice. Yeah. And then in terms of, what are you reading or where have you got your inspiration? Are there any books or training guides or any learning advice that you might be able to offer to people?
Yeah, so I mean, I listen to a lot of podcasts, and weirdly, I ended up on a podcast of someone I'm now working with. So it's Dalter and Charlotte, and I ended up advising them on their scale business, setting up in Dublin, and now we're working on a network project as well, which is very exciting. So yeah, I mean, podcast, going on a podcast and listening to podcasts has pretty much changed my, it's opened up some amazing opportunities. In terms of books, I think my favourite read or listen this year is Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. It's a book around negotiating. For anyone who's not listened to it or read it, it's transformative in how you enter negotiations, and has been for me. So I'd highly recommend that. But the other thing I'd say is look for inspiration outside of the industry. I think the industry, in terms of its tech, is quite dated. I think in terms of some of its, sort of marketing, some of its, just how sales tactics, how things are done. But there's great things outside of the industry that talented people could bring into the industry and make a real difference.
Yeah, fantastic. I mean, I've got that book on my list of. In fact, I've probably got it downloaded, ready to go, but. Unfortunately for me, I've usually got 2 or 3 books on the go at any one time, so getting around to finishing them all. But I've heard that from someone else, so I'll prioritize it up to the top. It sounds great. And keeping an open mind about what's going on outside of the industry, whether that's customer experience, how companies are treating their people, and forward planning. Starting with the end in mind. It's very easy when you get into your stride to suddenly think, right, this is the track. And if you get too narrow in your thinking, great to get narrow in your marketing and get you famous. If you get too narrow in your thinking, you can dismiss things without really exploring them thoroughly. So fantastic, great stuff. Well, look, I mean, that's really all we need now. Keep it short and snappy. But anything else that you'd like to add, Andy, and also how can people get hold of you if they want to pick your brains?
I'm available at recspand.com, available on LinkedIn, as you suspect, and you'll be seeing the stuff about our network, Lockdown Leadership Network, coming out in the next few weeks. Yeah,
perfect. Well, I'll include all your contact details in any notes, in any links that I send up. And I know you're busy, but I'm sure you've got time to reply to an email if it comes through, or if we get any people asking specific questions, we'll point them back in your direction, Andy. But thanks for joining me today. I think we've had great value there. And are you off anywhere exciting for the rest of the day, or
No, definitely not. So stuck here in this virtual office.
Yes, absolutely. Me too. Although mine's a real one behind me. Cool. Well, look, thanks again. I'll send you the links when they're through. But I'll see you soon.
All right. Take care. Cheers.
Cheers, Andy.